Hello, World Civ 106 classes. I just want to welcome you to week 14. And I mention in big bold letters must watch video. But the funny thing is that you're always supposed to watch every announcement is a must watched announcement. But that's not always the case, and we're almost done anyways. But there's some points that I wanted to clarify from what we covered, and I'm going to try to make this as brief as possible because I know that all of you are overworked. Many of you are just trying to get through all of your classes now, but I still have to, as an instructor of this class, when I see some things that I need to polish up or clarify, I'm going to address it, and I want you to pay attention because I am trying to teach you about all this stuff. So, a lot of you didn't seem to catch in the videos, but just something that I want to point out. Most of you caught that the Ethiopian church had some influences coming from Jewish practices. But what I want to make clear is that Judaism has been a religion within Africa itself. In Israel right now, there are groups of Ethiopians that were brought into the immigrated. They were pejoratively called Falasha. They don't like to be called that. They call themselves Beta Israel, meaning the House of Israel. And there is quite a bit of different material debating on the origins of them. But they're a Jewish community that has actually been in Ethiopia for some time. Many of them now, if not most, I believe, live in Israel. But you can look into that on your own free time. There's also a tribe called the Limba tribe. I did mention that as well, I believe, in the lectures, but I just want to point that out. So just thought you'd find that interesting. I want to bring that up. And I also want to just clarify something on the more grim topic of female genital mutilation, also known as circumcision. Now, I've researched more on this since I actually made the lectures, and I want to clarify for you just a little bit more. So, everything I said was correct in terms of the fact that doing this practice to women in various forms appears to be something that has been going on in Africa, predating Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. And we know for a fact that Christians and Jews and Muslims have had their women do circumcision in some form, as many people call female genital mutilation. But it's mainly associated with Islam. Now, the one thing that I became more aware of later on is that in places like Indonesia, where I thought that wasn't happening, it's not as prevalent, but apparently it's still a thing. So I want to explain something about that really quick in relation to Islam. So the Quran does not talk about female genital mutilation, circumcision of women, but there are some mention. There is a mentioning of it in some of the hadiths, and we've now covered the hadiths quite well. So I want to just mention that there are several passages that I read, and the way that it's mentioned, it talks of it as if Arabia was already having the practice. So it's not something that Muhammad brings into practice. It's something that was already being practiced. Now, if you look at Saudi Arabia, or Arabia, as it would have been, and how close it is to Africa, it's not hard to see how that could have been. That cultural practice would have been all around that area. I'm not an expert on the time frames or the understanding of how long that would have been and how that would have worked. But in those hadiths, there's the mention of a woman that was said to do it too extremely. And so he said, avoid extremes. And there's some passages in the hadith that talk about when does it count that a man and a woman have sexual intercourse. And he talked about once both the circumcised parts of the man and the woman touch each other, that would count. So he's talking like it's normal that a woman would have had a circumcision. And then there's a passage that makes it like a recommendation, but not an obligation. We can see how then that would have created a cultural practice that would have given the thumbs up to the practice, and would have then embedded it into Islamic practice. So in other words, it's a pre-Islamic practice, but through the hadith, it ends up becoming a common practice through the hadith. And then when Islam spreads, of course, those hadiths come with it. But as we've learned in these discussions, the influences of hadiths and the authorities of hadiths vary from there's a chain between being sahih, considered authentic, to da'if, to being considered weak, and different regions, I think, kind of handle those differently. So it is what it is. I'm not trying to make any actually commentary on it. Fortunately, it is a practice that the majority of the world is helping, I think, educate, promoting an end of is the bottom line. And the bottom line is, I just needed to clarify like a little bit more truthfulness on how that's operating within the world. So I'll leave it there at that. Now, when it comes to writing, many of you were stating that there's no writing in Africa prior to Islam and Arabic being brought in. Keep in mind that we were saying, with the exceptions of Egypt and Nubia. So remember, Egypt has had writing for a very long time. Nubia also. Now, why that didn't spread to the other parts of Africa, again, that's a whole nother topic, something to think about. But I want you to think about this really quickly, that the idea of how sophisticated a society is or not based on writing is misleading. You can memorize a lot of material and know a lot of things and not have writing. In fact, that's how the majority of human history has functioned. I met an Assyrian man that spoke 5 languages. He couldn't read one of them. Is he an intelligent, civilized man, if you will? I think most of you would be blown away to know 5 languages, especially as Americans. We just don't know. He has a lot of knowledge. He can communicate with a lot of different people, but he doesn't have the ability. He didn't get that formal education to learn symbols that communicate, speech. Now, keep in mind too that how a lot of people would carry lots of information for a long time is you'd have poems. And if you have a poem, and I'm not speaking specifically to Africa, but I know of this case in some of the European societies, and I'm pretty sure this is operating, this is how this worked for many cultures around the world. You might have syllables or a rhyming scheme or an alliteration scheme in which, if you're reciting it back, you have to count to make sure that all of the syllables add up exactly the same, or that the alliteration or the rhyme scheme would happen. So you would have this total sophisticated system to make sure that when you repeated it back to somebody that maybe your master and they're teaching you, they would say, "Oh, you missed something. Look it," and you would count the syllables or something like that. So, still a lot of sophistication to that, to a society that doesn't necessarily have writing. And in fact, much of Europe ended up getting writing much later through Christian missionaries inventing scripts Like for the Slavs, the Cyrillic alphabet is named after Saint Cyril, who invented that for the Slavs. So the Russian alphabet, for example, is invented by Christian missionary Saint Cyril. Okay, and then last I just want to say this. Look, even like in the Bible, the same as with the Quran and the Hebrew, it just uses consonants and no vowels. So imagine like the word building, BLDG, period. If I write BLDG period, most of you know when you see that it means building, even though not all of the letters are there to tell you that. But imagine if we go 100 years later and we're seeing somebody who's learned the English language and they're reading this. They wouldn't know necessarily, like by looking at those consonants, like what that word actually is. The Bible, as more and more Jews that were not using Hebrew and learning Hebrew on the daily, and were speaking some other language, the Hebrew scholars around the 7th and 8th century CE/AD, like way late, right, realized that it's possible that the entire written system of the Bible could have been lost in its precise meaning if they didn't invent a vowel system to put in there. And the Muslims would do the same for the Quran. So that's so even within the realm of learning writing, there can be limitations to that, because in that sense, it required people to still have an oral understanding culturally outside of the realm of the writing to understand what the writing would mean. Do you follow me? I know this video is taking a little bit longer than I said, but whatever. I hope you're following this still. And then the last thing that I want to mention is just the animism that you were noticing, which is similar to Native American culture. Many of you were talking about the animism in Africa. I want to say, if you remember going back to our ancient Mesopotamian history, that was the same thing. And when I was in Thailand, actually all throughout Southeast Asia, animism is so strong. And in Southeast Asia, they've just combined it with Buddhism, Hinduism, Christianity, or Islam. And even though sometimes those bigger religions that I just mentioned try to like get that out of the practices, it's so ingrained in such a part of people's day-to-day lives. So, you'll go by a tree in Thailand, and there's like a tie around it, a colorful tie, like a belt, and there's believed to be a spirit in that tree, and it's considered holy. Spirits just kind of emanate everywhere and everything in terms of belief. When like in Thailand, I mean, it's very common. You'll see a chopped off pig's head with other food and water or soda for a spirit. It's not always from an animistic, it could be for a person, but I mean, it's the animism mixed with other forms of spiritism mixed with the religion of Buddhism is what you see there. And I think Africa shows a lot of the same. By the way, I think Thailand is like the 4th largest consumer of strawberry Fango soda, and most of that is going to spirits. You can go all around Thailand and just they opened up the soda, they put a straw. It's kind of an environmental catastrophe too. But there's the Kumintong, the spirit boy that happens to like the strawberry soda. So that's what happened. So it's a global thing. I was in Hong Kong, you see the same thing, food, rice, and water being left out in front of a business at nighttime for the spirits. Anyways, so that's enough of that. I hope that you're all finding all this so interesting. We're almost done, but look how all of the things that you've learned come together. And, that's what I want you to be excited about. Because at this time, many of you are just tired and kind of maybe want this class to end because it's just school in general. But I want you to feel empowered. You've been learning a lot. And if you have any more questions on anything, please get back to me. And I hope that you're having a great week. And lest I forget, have a happy Thanksgiving. And if you don't celebrate, enjoy the day. I know some of you don't for various reasons. But I hope everybody has a blessed, safe week, and we'll be in touch.